Hi everyone, I'm the creator of this channel. This story was told to me by my grandmother. There's no fiction in it. This is a completely true story that happened long before I was born. Enjoy. It was 1978. I had just married the most handsome man in our little town, your grandfather. I remember it like it happened yesterday. His parents gave us an old house out on a small farm. It had been passed down to them from some distant relative. I never imagined we'd be living together so soon, but it felt like God had blessed our marriage and given us a home. We packed up our things and drove out to the countryside. The house was in a beautiful, but very remote location. It was our first time seeing it in person. I wasn't expecting a luxurious mansion or anything, but I also wasn't prepared for just how broken down it really was. Jeremy wrapped his arm around me and said that together, we'd fix the place up, get a dog, have children, and build a real family. I never doubted him for a second. I believed in him completely. But before we could do any of that, we were about to face something terrifying, something real, a test that would change everything. When I stepped inside the house, I immediately noticed a strange smell. It was rotten, like something had spoiled, like something had died in there. Maybe it was a wild animal or rats. I wasn't sure. But the weirdest part was that the house was dusty, yet there were almost no cobwebs. It felt like someone had been living there not that long ago. There were dirty dishes on the table, old canned food, and empty bottles scattered around. I knew for a fact this house had been abandoned for at least 10 years. Only after the last owner died did it pass to us through inheritance, but it honestly felt like someone had been here just a few weeks ago. We dropped our bags right by the front door. The place was a mess, so before we could settle in, we needed to clean at least part of it, just enough to spend the night. The house still had electricity. We just had to flip the breaker. Jeremy went outside to turn it on, while I stayed inside and started picking trash up off the floor. I was going to need a ton of trash bags to get rid of all the cans, bottles, and food wrappers. It got dark quickly outside. I looked out the window. Thick clouds were rolling in, and it had started to rain. Jeremy was taking a long time. I decided to go outside and check on him. But when I got to the breaker box, he wasn't there. There was no sign of him. So I flipped the switch myself, and the lights in the house came on. I went back inside. The rain was getting heavier, and the wind slammed the door shut behind me. I turned on the light in the living room, and the dim glow filled the space. The house gave me a strange sense of unease. But what worried me most was that Jeremy had disappeared. There were no cell phones back then. I couldn't just call him. I tried to distract myself by continuing to clean. It didn't take long before the trash bags were filled to the top. And still, no sign of Jeremy. I looked out the window and stared into the distance. Raindrops tapped against the glass. A flash of lightning lit up the sky. I suddenly felt deeply alone, like every other person in the world had vanished, and it was just me and this house left behind. And then, I saw my husband. He was standing out in the woods. I immediately ran outside after him. "What are you doing out here? Why didn't you come back to the house?" I shouted. Jeremy was soaked from head to toe. He could easily catch a cold. We went back inside, and once we were out of the rain, I asked him again what he had been doing out there. At first, Jeremy didn't want to worry me, but eventually, he told me everything. He said he had seen a man watching us from the trees. He first noticed him when we drove into the forest, and then again while he was out by the breaker box. He tried to follow him, but the man vanished. Jeremy described him as being around 50 years old, bald, and wearing old, torn clothing. But the strangest part? He said the man looked familiar, like he had seen that face before, but he couldn't remember where. Jeremy was freezing. I gave him a towel and unpacked our kettle. I put it on the stove, but then realized the stove was gas, and an old one at that. It wouldn't work. The house was getting colder. We needed to warm up fast. I saw some firewood next to the fireplace and decided to light a fire. I prayed the chimney wasn't clogged. Luckily, the fire caught, and we sat by the fireplace. The place was still dirty and full of junk, but the firelight and warmth gave us a little peace. We cuddled up for an hour. It was one of the coziest moments of our lives. But then a loud crash came from outside, like something had fallen. Jeremy went out to check. Maybe it was the wind. He found a ladder had fallen on the far side of the house. He came back to tell me, and just then, thunder boomed and lightning lit up the windows. The power went out. The fireplace was now our only source of light. That's when things started to get really strange. Dust fell from the ceiling above. I went upstairs while Jeremy was unpacking our sleeping gear. I wanted to check if we could sleep in one of the bedrooms. I walked into the room that would later become your dad's room. It smelled of mold and was filthy, but there was a bed with a sheet, a pillow, and a blanket. A strange thought crossed my mind. What if someone's been sleeping here? And as you've probably guessed by now, I was right. I went downstairs and told my husband we might have to sleep in the car, or right there on the floor by the fire. We decided to stay by the fireplace until the firewood ran out. Okay, I said. I'll make us some dinner. I turned toward the door and looked out the window. There he was, a man, in the woods, staring straight at me. I froze, couldn't speak. Jeremy asked what was wrong, and I pointed. The man turned and disappeared into the trees. I was terrified. I had almost forgotten about him. Jeremy walked over and locked the door. Unfortunately, our windows didn't have blinds, so I hung up blankets and towels to cover them. It made me feel safer, but I still felt like someone was watching us. Then another sound, this time from the attic. I went upstairs again. The door creaked. I froze. Who's there? No answer. Maybe it was just a draft. Jeremy came upstairs, worried. I told him I'd heard something. The hallway was darker than the rooms. You could barely see anything, just the outlines of walls and door frames. Jeremy lit a lighter. That's when I saw them. Old photographs on the wall. Black and white portraits of the previous owners. We walked down the hallway, and then I saw it. One of the photos showed a bald man. That was him, the man in the woods, only younger, about 30 years younger. Who was he? Then we heard footsteps. One of the bedroom doors creaked open. I saw a man's hand. The lighter went out. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it. The lighter wouldn't work. We heard the footsteps getting closer in the dark. A man stood before us. His eyes were lifeless, and he looked homeless. We were terrified, but it only lasted a few seconds. Jeremy stared at him and recognized him. It was Uncle Aaron. He was supposed to be dead. No, it wasn't a ghost, even though I thought it was at first. It was really him. He was alive. We later found out he'd been missing for years, and most of the family had lost contact with him. The police wouldn't look for him. They declared him dead. And the bald man? He was an old friend of Aaron's. He was the only one who knew Aaron had dementia, and he tried to help him whenever he could. Soon after that, Aaron was moved to a care facility. We decided to visit him every week. He had no one else. It felt like our duty. A couple years later, Uncle Aaron passed away. Only then did we fully move into the house. I've never been afraid of the dark. Even as a kid, I actually liked hiding in dark rooms. It felt like I disappeared from the world. But that night, the darkness was different. It breathed. It watched. I was driving home after a long day in the city. Returning to my house outside town usually felt peaceful silence, pine trees, fresh air. But that night, the road stretched on too long. Evening fatigue clung to my skin, and the fuel gauge was slowly, steadily dipping toward empty. I remembered an old gas station up ahead. I'd stopped there once or twice before, mostly for coffee from a vending machine. Not great, but hot. When the glowing sign that read "Gas and Go" appeared in the dark, I actually sighed in relief. The station stood alone among the trees. No other cars, no light in the windows, just a pale yellow bulb buzzing above one of the pumps. I pulled in, parked, and killed the engine. And then I noticed it was too quiet. No crickets, no humming from freezers, no distant highway sounds, just the faint crackle of the lamp overhead. I went out, inserted the card, but the terminal didn't work. Nothing. No error, no beep, just a dead screen. I walked around looking for someone. Every door was locked. The windows were dark. No sign of life inside. I was about to get back in the car when I saw the storage room door was slightly open. I don't know why I went over. Maybe I thought someone forgot to close it. Maybe I thought someone was inside and could help. I knocked. No response. I pushed it open. A little more dust, stale coffee, and something metallic hung in the air. No lights. I shone my phone flashlight inside. Empty. Shelves, boxes, a single chair. I turned to leave, then something crunched under my foot. I pointed the light down. A cell phone. Screen shattered, the casing smeared with blood, like someone had tried to stomp it or dropped it while panicking. I froze. My pulse thudded in my ears. "Is someone there?" I asked, my voice cracking slightly. No answer. I stepped out quickly. The air felt colder. I climbed into my car, locked the doors, and turned on the headlights. I was ready to drive off until I saw the fuel gauge. Dead empty. No chance of making it home. Great, I muttered, pressing my forehead to the wheel. I had to figure something out. My phone showed a single useless bar. Maybe wait for someone to come? That's when I saw movement. Just on the edge of the headlights, near the tree line, something flickered past. Fast, almost too fast to see, like a person darting between the trunks. I froze. A minute later, again, closer this time. I locked the doors, eyes fixed on the dark outside. I couldn't sit in the car anymore. It felt too exposed. I jumped out and ran back toward the storage room. It suddenly felt safer than the open. I slipped inside, shut the door gently, pressed my back to the wall. It was pitch black, cold, the same metallic, dusty smell. I must have sat there for 10 minutes, my heart beat loud in my ears. Then, footsteps. Slow, crunching gravel, approaching the door. I turned off my phone light, held my breath. The steps stopped just outside. Someone walked up and opened the door. Sweat was running down my neck and I had no idea what to do. I was terrified, but ready to fight for my life. In the dark, my hand found a brick and I gripped it tightly. When the door opened, the room remained pitch black. I was still hidden. The man stepped inside and felt around until he picked up the broken phone. I tried not to breathe, not to make a sound, but I accidentally shifted my hand. The man froze instantly and started listening, peering into the darkness. It felt like I was trapped inside a nightmare, right at the moment when you're supposed to wake up, but I wasn't dreaming. He took the phone and left, quietly shutting the door behind him. I stayed inside until morning. When the sun finally rose, I stepped out. My car was still there. I got in, started it, and drove forward. There was just enough gas to make it home. I've never stopped at an empty gas station at night again, and I never found out what really happened there. My name's Michael. I've been driving an RV across the country for almost 10 years, sometimes for the adventure, and sometimes just to get away from the noise of the city and unwind. I used to travel with friends a lot, but over the past couple of months, I stopped. Now I travel alone. No route, no plans, no signal. There's something special about that kind of vibe. That evening, I stopped outside of town, about 30 kilometers from the nearest settlement. There was just a dirt road, some pine trees, and an empty, isolated spot near an old abandoned quarry. The kind of place I like. Quiet, not a soul around, just sky, rocks, and wind. I parked and turned off the engine. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, and the air was getting cool. I turned on a dim light inside, yellow, warm, cozy. Made myself some coffee, climbed onto the couch with the mug, and put on a movie on my laptop. About an hour later, the laptop battery died. I yawned, turned off the light, and laid down to sleep. It was completely silent outside, the kind of silence you never find in the city. I slept peacefully at first, but then suddenly woke up for no reason. I had this feeling that someone was nearby. I couldn't hear anything, but the sensation kept growing stronger. Nighttime anxiety, I thought, and tried to go back to sleep. Maybe 20 minutes passed. I was almost asleep again, when I heard footsteps. They were quiet, but distinct. The crunch of gravel underfoot. Someone was walking near my RV. Anyone, even a seasoned traveler, would feel fear in that moment. Who the hell would be out here, in a place like this, in the middle of the night? My heart started pounding. The footsteps moved to the driver's side. Someone was just standing there. Then I heard a faint creak. The driver's door handle. Someone tried to open it. I quietly got up from bed and grabbed a knife off the table. It was dark inside. I didn't turn on the lights, didn't want to give myself away. The person moved around to the passenger side, tried that door too. Then to the back, where the entrance was. I could hear them slowly circling the whole trailer. Then silence again. I walked over to the door and must have made a noise by accident. "Who's there?" I asked. A man said he was a security guard. I took the risk and opened the door. A bright flashlight blinded me for a moment. The guard asked what I was doing there, and if I knew that being on quarry grounds was prohibited. He acted very suspiciously, twitchy movements, and he reeked of alcohol. I told him I'd leave in the morning. I asked why he tried to open the doors. "What are you talking about?" he replied. "I didn't try to open anything. Have a good night, and be careful." And then he left. I couldn't sleep after that. I hadn't planned on leaving, so I made myself another coffee and started watching a show. About half an hour later, I dozed off again, but was woken by a strange sound. Someone was humming a song. I couldn't make out the words, but I was sure I wasn't dreaming. Someone was back near my RV. This time, I felt a bit more confident. I figured it was the same quarry guard. I grabbed my flashlight, turned on the lights, and walked to the door. Off in the distance, I saw a man, just his silhouette. My flashlight wasn't strong enough to see more. I froze. Fear crept up again. It looked wrong, creepy. If you've ever played that Slender Man game, you'll get the idea. The man was just standing there, facing my direction, like he was waiting for something. I shouted, asked what he wanted. He didn't respond. I told him not to come any closer or I'd use a weapon. I didn't have one, just a kitchen knife, but I figured it might buy me time to drive out of there. I shut the door and climbed into the driver's seat. Then I noticed the driver's door was unlocked. I had forgotten to lock it. I shoved the key into the ignition and turned it, but the engine didn't start. I looked out the window where the man had been. He was gone. I tried again. Nothing. Looked around, checked the side mirrors. Not seeing him only made me more anxious. Tried to start the engine again. It sputtered, but stalled. I was furious at myself for never replacing the starter. Then I heard footsteps outside. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of the man. He was standing by the door. I tried the ignition again. My hands were shaking, sweat dripping down my forehead. He tried the door. I looked in the mirror and saw his face. The man looked terrifying. He had to be around 60. His face showed almost no emotion. He looked like a walking corpse. I rushed to the door and wedged a chair against it. He kept trying to force his way in. I couldn't call anyone. No signal in this place. But then I remembered the guard. I had an idea to signal for help. I slammed the car horn. The loud blaring sound startled the man at the door. A minute later, I saw a flashlight in the distance. It was the guard. He asked what was going on, and I told him everything. I described the man who was trying to break in. The guard's face changed. He told me no one lived anywhere nearby, said I probably got spooked by a wild coyote. Either he didn't believe me or didn't want to. I asked if he could stay while I changed the spark plugs. He said he had to leave immediately, couldn't abandon his post for long. I changed the plugs almost completely in the dark, got the engine started, and decided to drive off right away. I passed the security checkpoint on the way out and saw the guard talking to someone. It was dark, I couldn't make out who it was, but something deep inside told me it was him. The guard looked at me one last time, and I left. A year later, I came back, but didn't stay overnight. I wanted to speak with the guard, but he wasn't there. Instead, there was a woman on duty. She told me the truth. The guard used to sell illegal substances out here. Turns out, a lot of dangerous people came to that place at night. One night, there was some kind of altercation. The guard was stabbed. They couldn't save him. Now I understood who that creepy man was, and what he might have wanted from me. Hi, I'm Michael. 10 years ago, I worked at an insurance company. Every day I'd call clients to offer them new terms and services. Most of them probably hated me for always calling at the worst possible time. That day, I was working from home. I only needed to make 30 calls and finish a few other tasks. I sat in front of my computer all day, well into the evening. I had just one last call to make. I dialed the number and went to the kitchen to make some coffee. I was wearing wireless headphones, so I didn't have to sit in front of the screen during the call. The client picked up. I asked for his name to make sure it was him. It's pretty common for a relative to answer instead. Hello, is this Bob? No response. I repeated the question. Hello, is this Bob? Someone was breathing into the phone. A few seconds later, I heard an answer.
Yes.
His voice was strange, tired, almost emotionless. Once I was sure I had the right person, I began my pitch about a new life insurance plan. Normally, this is the point where clients hang up or politely say they're not interested. But Bob didn't hang up. He just listened silently. I asked, "Would you like to update your policy?" He replied,
That's a very interesting offer.
Again, his voice was cold and completely flat. So, does the new plan work for you? I asked. Bob went silent. I started to feel uncomfortable, so I repeated the question. Bob hung up. Well, that was the most awkward call of the day. I poured my coffee and took off my headphones. I left the computer on and went to relax in the living room. I put on a YouTube video, something about wilderness survival, and ended up falling asleep. I woke up around 11 p.m. and went to bed. As I walked past my desk, I noticed my computer was still on. I went over to shut it down, but then I saw a few notifications on the screen. Missed calls. They were all from Bob's number. That surprised me. I figured I'd call him back in the morning. My workday was over after all. Still, it was strange. It was the first time a client ever tried to call me back, especially one who had just hung up. I forgot to turn off the computer again and went to bed. I fell asleep quickly, but had a bad dream. I don't remember what it was exactly, but it jolted me awake. I opened my eyes and lifted my head. The room was dark, with only the glow of my computer monitor lighting it faintly. I got up, walked to the kitchen, drank a glass of water, and went back to my room. More missed call notifications, again from Bob's number. I couldn't understand why he was trying to reach me over and over, at night. What could possibly be that urgent? I was about to shut the computer down when another call came in. It was Bob again. It was weird. I mean, I wouldn't even call my friends this late, and this guy was practically a stranger. I decided to answer. I put on my headphones. Hello? Why are you calling me at this hour? No response. Just silence. Someone was just breathing heavily into the phone. I asked again, "Why are you calling?" Then he spoke.
Michael, I need your help.
His voice was distant, emotionless. I asked him what was wrong. Bob took a few deep, shaky breaths, and then he hung up. I had no idea what was going on. I tried to call him back, but no one picked up. A few minutes later, Bob called again.
I don't have a choice, Michael,
he said. Then silence. I stayed quiet too. This was starting to feel like some kind of weird prank, or worse. I asked again, "What do you mean? What choice?" No reply, but I heard a strange sound, like someone slowly opening a door. "Bob?"
They're watching me,
he whispered. A chill ran down my spine. "Who's watching you?" I asked. No answer, just breathing again. Steady, muffled. Then the call dropped. I tried calling back, but still no response. A few minutes later, I shut down the computer, but I couldn't sleep. Half an hour later, I was back at my desk, just sitting there, waiting. I was sure Bob would call again. And he did. This time, his voice was more tense. He was clearly on the move. I could hear his footsteps, like he was in a large warehouse or something. Bob told me someone was chasing him, that they wanted to kill him. I didn't fully believe him, so I asked why he was calling me instead of 911. Bob said the police wouldn't be able to help. Then he hung up again. A few minutes later, I got a message from an unknown number. "You'll pay for everything." That's when I stopped seeing this world as real. For a second, I thought I was dreaming, but it was real. Another call from Bob. I asked if he was messing with me. He didn't answer, just kept breathing into the phone, like he didn't even know we were connected. Then suddenly he spoke.
Michael, this is all because of you.
I asked what he meant.
Look out the window,
Bob said. His voice was calm and terrifying. My eye twitched. I stood up, and somehow I had no doubt that I would see Bob outside. The room was dark. I slowly walked over to the window. I opened the blinds and looked out. Across the street, standing right in front of my house, was a man. He was wearing an old coat and a hood. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. No response, just breathing. Then the man turned and walked around the corner of my building. Was he heading for the entrance? My whole body tensed. My mind started racing with awful thoughts. Who did I cross? What did he want from me? Bob was still breathing into the mic. I lost it. I shouted, loud and angry, that I was calling the police. No reply. I hung up. Then I heard the elevator in the building. I looked through the peephole and waited. But the elevator stopped at another floor. I locked my door, all 3 locks, and tried to think. Someone had threatened me. I had seen him outside my home. Should I call the police? But if they came too quickly, they wouldn't find him. He'd just wait until they left, then come back. All I could do now was wait. That deep, sick feeling of dread didn't leave me for another 30 minutes. Another call. I asked again what he wanted from me. Bob said I didn't need to worry. Soon, I'd stop getting calls from him. What do you mean? What are you planning, Bob? I'll never forget his last words.
Are you sure my name is Bob?
Terrified, I ripped off my headphones and ended the call. What the hell? Who was I talking to? I decided to check our client database. What I saw shocked me. Bob had died a year ago. He was 65 and had died of a heart attack. Suddenly, I heard footsteps in the stairwell. Panic and fear gripped me. I went pale and my stomach churned. I slowly, silently walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was my neighbor. I opened the door. She asked why I was talking so loudly at night and told me to keep it down. I apologized and shut the door. I went back to my computer and blocked Bob's number permanently. Who called me? And what did he want? Who was the man outside my house? Just a random passerby? Or not? Now this story will stay with me forever. In 2022, I will turn 22 years old. A week after my birthday, my parents bought themselves a new house. They allowed me to stay and live in an old house, which is located not far outside the city. I thought I would feel lonely, but I had a girlfriend who lived in the city. I immediately invited her to move in with me, but she refused. She studies in college, and if she moved, it would be inconvenient for her to travel so far to lectures. On the last day of summer, I invited her to my home. We talked almost the whole day and had fun. For dinner, Sarah suggested making pizza according to an Italian recipe. I had all the necessary ingredients for a delicious pizza in my refrigerator. We turned on loud music and started cooking. After 2 hours, it was already dark outside. Our pizza turned out delicious, but Italians definitely won't eat it. I went outside to get some fresh air while Sarah packed her things. It was very dark outside, and only the lantern on the porch of the house gave off some light. I took out my cell phone and saw a notification on the screen about several missed calls from my mother. It was already late, and I decided that I would call her back in the morning. After 10 minutes, Sarah left the house, and I finally decided to accompany her. I understood that there were few houses around, and all the neighbors were already asleep. It is not safe for a girl to walk alone in such a place. The bus stop was 2 miles from my house, and we had to hurry. I always accompany Sarah to the bus stop, and this time was no exception. I always leave the lights on in the house before I leave. Even though I'm a man, I'm a little afraid of the dark. Having the light on calmed me down, and on the way back, my house was like a beacon. We left the house and headed along a narrow country road towards the highway. It was very dark outside. There was a dense forest on both sides of the road. We had to use the flashlights on our phones to light our way, but this cold light only intensified our fears. Small animals made terrible sounds that would frighten any person on the road. But we were alone, and we both pretended that the darkness didn't scare us. However, I understood that I still had to go home, alone. We tried to talk about different topics to take our minds off bad thoughts, but suddenly a human silhouette appeared in the distance. A strange thin man comes towards us. Sarah stopped. She was afraid to go further. Thoughts immediately appeared in Sarah's head that this man could be drunk and pose a danger. I told Sarah that he was just a man and we should just move on. But in fact, I also felt a threat emanating from this man. Perhaps the darkness and creepy forest force our imagination to invent something that is not there. We just moved on, hoping to quickly pass by this man and forget about him. But the man came up to us and spoke. I saw that Sarah was very scared. There was a terrible scar on the man's face. He was dressed in old, torn clothes. The man asked just one question: "Where does this road go?" I explained to him that if he went further along the road, he would come to a small settlement. I told him that there are several houses there. The man did not say where he was going, and I suggested that he go in the opposite direction to get onto the highway. I thought he was lost, but the man did not listen to me. His gaze was directed at my chest. He simply turned around and walked straight. I decided to follow his example. Sarah was shocked, and the rest of the way, she only talked to me about this strange man. I was glad that we had almost reached the bus stop, but I was constantly thinking about the fact that I would walk back home alone. I said goodbye to Sarah and went back. I walked probably 3 times faster than usual. Every rustle coming from the forest accelerated me and gave me strength. I felt strong psychological stress, and this man could not get out of my head. I just wanted to get home faster and not meet him along the way. Soon, I saw a light in the distance. My house. Lighthouse in the dark. I didn't feel safe until I came to the door. At that moment, I thought, we will never go down this road this late again. Call me a coward, but everyone has their own fears. I opened the door to the house, and the feeling of anxiety returned to me. The lights in the corridor were turned off. I definitely remember that I left the light on before leaving. At that moment, there were a lot of thoughts in my head, but I decided to act like a reasonable person. I went to the switch and turned on the light. I guess I just forgot to turn on the light when I left. I locked the front door and went straight into the living room. I was very tired and wanted to sleep, but I left the light in the hallway on. I turned on the TV and lay down on the sofa. I usually fall asleep perfectly while watching some TV series. 15 minutes later, I was already asleep. I woke up from a strange noise. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. A minute later, I realized that the house was too dark. Only the light from the TV illuminated the living room. Without getting up from the sofa, I slowly turned my head towards the hallway. The lights are turned off. At that moment, my heart beat twice as fast and I panicked. I was almost 100% sure that I was not alone in the house. I continued to lie on the sofa and peer into the darkness. I was scared to just get up and go there. The darkness got the better of me again. Soon I remembered that I heard a roar. The noise came from the kitchen. The phone was in another part of the room and I could not take it silently. There was still a lot of time until morning and I realized that I needed to find out what that noise was. I hoped that my phobia was the cause of my anxiety again. For a few more minutes, I tried to listen to the silence, after which I slowly stood up and took the scissors from the table. I realized that I couldn't call the police silently and therefore decided to defend myself. I slowly walked to the switch and turned on the light in the hallway. If there is someone in the house, he definitely heard me already. I asked loudly, "Who is there?" I plucked up my courage and opened the door to the kitchen. He turned on the light and calmed down. There is no one in the kitchen. I still didn't understand what that noise was. Afterwards, I checked all the other rooms and there was no one in either. I left the light on again and went into the bedroom. In the morning, I woke up in a good mood and went downstairs. The light was on. The first thing I did was call Sarah and ask how she was doing. Then I remembered that my mother called me. I called her, and my mother told me that she wanted to warn me. A week ago, a patient escaped from a psychiatric hospital. The police are looking for him. According to the latest information, he was walking along the highway towards our settlement. I asked my mother what a man looks like. She said he has a scar on his face. I fall into a stupor and don't know what to say. I remember his crazy look and I feel uneasy. I go into the hallway to turn off the light and notice that the front door is open. At this moment, I realize that he was inside the house at night. And when I opened the door to the kitchen, he was hiding right behind it. I don't know what would have happened if I had found it, but now I always check the whole house before I go to bed. This story happened to me 4 years ago. Then I worked in an office and was waiting for a promotion. I had to work a lot, which is why I came home very late. By the way, I lived alone, since shortly before that I divorced my wife. I was returning home after a hard day at work. It was dark outside and lightly raining. I love the smell of wet asphalt, but on this day, I was too tired to think about it. Late in the evening, I came home. The rain outside the window intensified. I immediately went to the kitchen to quickly eat and then go to bed. This day was very difficult. I didn't even have the strength to cook food, so I just heated up a hot dog. Immediately after dinner, I went to the second floor to my bedroom. While climbing the stairs, I heard a strange noise coming from the attic. I thought my old house was trying to tell me that it didn't like rain. I entered my room and went to bed. I tried to sleep for a long time, but the thought of that noise from the attic kept me from doing so. I thought there was a hole in my roof and water was dripping in right now. I couldn't just go to sleep. I got up, took a flashlight, and went to the stairs leading to the attic. When I turned on the light in the attic again, something fell. Now I was sure that the roof of the house was broken. I approached the stairs and began to climb to the top. At that moment, I felt cold throughout my body. Fear enveloped me. I went downstairs. I didn't have the courage to go upstairs. I slowly and silently went to my room to call the police. I was sure that I was not alone in the house. After 15 minutes, the police arrived, and I explained to them what was happening. The officer went up to the attic and checked the entire room. There was no one in the house. The police left, but I didn't feel any safer. I could only believe that there was a cat in my attic, hiding somewhere in the wall. I went to bed and woke up early in the morning. I checked the attic again before going to work, but there was nothing strange there. I worked late all day again, and was even more tired than last time. It's raining outside again. I came home and immediately went to bed. I had already forgotten about what happened yesterday, or I just didn't want to think about it. I don't know. I lay down in bed and heard the noise again. This time I decided to act more boldly. I took a flashlight and went to the stairs. I went upstairs and opened the door a little. At that moment, something happened that will forever remain in my memory. Someone in the attic runs towards me and slams the door. I go downstairs in shock and call the police. I lock the door that leads to my room and sit quietly by the window. Raindrops hit the window and get on my nerves. I'm trying to listen so I can be ready if someone comes in here. After 2 minutes, I hear the door in the attic open. I'm panicking and don't know what to do. Someone is walking towards my room. Suddenly, the sounds of footsteps disappeared. Someone is standing outside my door right now. I held my breath. This is the only thing I could do at that moment. I was in a stupor and could not move. There was silence for a whole minute, and then I heard footsteps again. He left through the front door. I sat in the room for another 10 minutes until the police arrived. They searched the entire house but found no one. The officer told me that the man who got into my house ran away. His tracks were washed away by the rain and they could not find him. That day was the last time I spent the night in this house. I sold it and bought an apartment in the city center. but I still don't know who lived in my house with me. And would I have been alive if I had not locked the door? Hello, my name is Ellie. I want to tell you a story that happened to me 7 years ago, and I still can't explain what happened in that house. Perhaps you can help me. I was pregnant, and my husband suggested moving from a small apartment to a larger house. We rented it from a 60-year-old woman named Andrea. We liked the low rental price. The woman told us that she lives in another city and cannot come here to check the house, and she does not want to sell it. She was ready to reduce the price for a good family who would live in her house. There was a lot of old furniture inside, but that didn't bother us. The house had many rooms and a large bedroom. For the first time I entered this house with my mother, I immediately felt strange because the woman's things were lying everywhere. I had a feeling that someone lived here, even though Andrea told us that no one had lived in this house for a long time. Mom helped me clean the whole house, but this did not help get rid of the strange feeling. I felt like I was invading someone's home. My husband came home from work and reassured me. He explained that because of the pregnancy, I became paranoid. On the first night, both of us could not sleep for a long time. The husband experienced discomfort due to the mattress, but I couldn't sleep for another reason. I heard strange rustling noises in the corridor and behind the walls. The husband was sure that the sounds were made by rats or other animals, but that didn't reassure me. After a few days, I began to get used to the strange noise outside the walls. In the morning, the postman brought us a newspaper and I put it on the table in the kitchen. The day passed as usual, but this night was the most terrible in my life. That day my husband was late at work and I was alone at home all evening. I decided to make lasagna for dinner. I am not yet used to cooking in the new kitchen, and therefore the cooking process took a little longer. Almost all this time she stood with her face turned into the window. Behind me there was a door that led into the hallway. Soon I heard a strange sound coming from the hallway. The door was open, but the light was only on in the kitchen. I immediately turned around, but it was too dark in the hallway. I didn't attach any importance to this sound and continued cooking. A few minutes later, I heard a noise similar to human stomping. I turned around again and thought that my husband had come home. If my husband returned home, he would turn on the light, but the hallway was dark. I felt scared, but I couldn't go into the hallway. I peered into the darkness for 5 minutes and tried to hear something. I called my husband and asked him to come home quickly. He put the call on speaker and talked to me during the drive home. I felt calmer and continued preparing dinner. Again, something fell in the hallway. I looked out the window and saw the silhouette of a man in the reflection. He stood in the hallway, in the dark. I didn't want to turn around, I just couldn't do it. A moment later, the man disappeared. I fell silent and my husband began to worry. I stood silently for another 5 minutes and hoped that everything would be fine. My husband arrived and turned on the light in the hallway. There were our family photos on the floor. He looked around the whole house and found no one. He thought that I just thought I saw a man. The husband was sure that there was no one in the house. He tried to calm me down all evening, but I was still worried. We went to bed, and I fell asleep very quickly. Apparently, due to stress, my body was very tired. This night, I dreamed of my child. We had a boy. The strangest thing is that at that moment, we knew the sex of the child, and we were supposed to have a girl. The dream was ordinary, but suddenly, I began to feel that someone was approaching me and woke up. I opened my eyes and saw a man sitting in a dark corridor. It was old. He was wearing only shorts and a dirty t-shirt. He held the newspaper in his hands and looked at me. At that moment, my heart was beating 3 times faster than usual, and I couldn't even scream. Fear enveloped me and didn't let me move. I pushed my husband several times and he woke up. He immediately got up and turned on the light. But the man had already disappeared. There was a newspaper on the floor. I explained to my husband that there was a creepy old man in our house, but he didn't believe me, because there was definitely no one in the house except us. He thinks that the newspaper was dropped by one of us or that it was blown away by the wind. But I knew that I was telling the truth. The husband searched the entire house and found no traces. He stood in the hallway and tried to explain to me that we shouldn't worry. At that moment, I noticed that our front door was not locked. The husband came to the door and said that he absolutely locked it when he entered the house. We called the police and called the woman from whom we rented this house. The next day, we packed all our things and went to my mother. After this, the landlord assured us that no one lived in her house. She swore that only she and I had the keys to the house. But we did not take risks and left this house forever. Who was this man? How did he enter the house? And how long did he live with us? These questions will forever remain in my memory. When I turned 20, my parents decided to rent an entire house by the lake. It was their birthday gift to me. Oh, by the way, I'm Sandra, and that birthday could have easily been my last. The story started off just like any normal family trip. We packed enough stuff for a 2-day stay and headed out to the house. It was about 150 miles away, deep in the middle of nowhere. I slept through most of the drive, so for me, the time passed quickly. I forgot to mention, my younger brother Sean was with us too. He was probably glued to his phone playing Minecraft or whatever it is teenagers are into these days. After a few hours, we finally pulled up to the lake house. It was big, 2 stories, with a huge BBQ area. There was even a large wooden barrel filled with warm water. I had never seen anything like it before. Before we could move in, we had to sign a rental agreement and pay the owner. His name was Bill. He looked about 60 years old. He wore a dirty work jumpsuit, and it seemed pretty clear he wasn't making a fortune off this rental business. Bill took the money, showed us around the house, and told us to make ourselves at home. Then he said goodbye and left. And just like that, we started our little vacation. I'm not going to describe the whole first day. Nothing special really happened. But around 6 p.m., a chain of events started that almost ended in tragedy for my family. My dad was grilling meat outside, and I decided to take a walk through the woods. I didn't go far. I could still see the house. It was still light out, and I was just strolling along a little trail, enjoying the fresh air. That's when I heard it, a branch snapping somewhere in the trees. I turned around and saw someone standing behind a big tree. They were clearly trying to hide from me. I immediately decided it was time to head back to the house. Maybe it was just someone using the woods as a bathroom and I had interrupted them. I picked up my pace and glanced back. The stranger was gone. Honestly, it scared me pretty bad. I was practically running back to the house, constantly looking around. My dad noticed me and asked what happened. I told him I had seen a man hiding behind a tree. Dad said it was probably just my imagination, or maybe a hunter. Come on, I'm not 5 years old making up stories about imaginary people. I went inside because it was starting to get chilly. I didn't tell Mom about what had happened. I just helped her set the table. Soon after, Dad came inside too, bringing the cooked steaks. It was getting darker outside. We turned on the lights in the fireplace and sat down for dinner. And then, a knock at the door. Dad opened it. It was Bill. He said he just wanted to check if everything was okay, and he brought us some more firewood. Dad thanked him but pointed out that we already had plenty of wood. As for me, I couldn't help but feel that Bill was invading our personal space. Before leaving, he asked if he could use our bathroom. Dad naturally said yes. An hour later, it was very dark outside. We stayed at the table, listening to soft, relaxing music. My parents reminisced about my childhood and funny memories about my brother and me. It was very cozy, but night was approaching, and it was time to sleep. I went upstairs. My room was at the end of the hallway, right across from the bathroom. I entered, flopped onto the big soft bed. I wasn't sleepy yet, so I decided to scroll through Instagram and watch some YouTube videos. Around 2 a.m., I heard a noise. Something had fallen. At first, I thought it was just from the video I was watching, but when I rewound it, I realized the sound had come from outside my headphones. I took them off and listened. Maybe it was Sean going to the bathroom or one of my parents. I decided to just go to sleep and close my eyes. I began to dream, but hadn't fully fallen asleep yet. I don't even know what that state is called. Suddenly, a loud noise jolted me awake. My heart started racing, and for a moment, I didn't even know where I was. It scared me so much to wake up and not recognize my surroundings. I had momentarily forgotten that we were spending the night in a different house. After a minute, I pulled myself together. Had I imagined it? But then I heard another sound. Someone slammed a door across from my room. I got out of bed and approached the door. I could hear footsteps. I opened the door, but the hallway was empty. Curiosity got the better of me. Maybe Sean had gone downstairs to sneak some cake. I put on my slippers and went to check Sean's room, but he was sound asleep in bed. Then I peeked into my parents' room. They were both sleeping too. What the hell? I had definitely heard footsteps. I slowly moved toward the staircase. I could hear someone moving around in the kitchen. It was very dark, and I accidentally stumbled. At that moment, the sound stopped. I rushed to wake up my parents. Mom, Dad, someone's downstairs. Dad got up to check. I followed right behind him. We went down and turned on the kitchen light, and there was Bill. He looked at us, clearly surprised to see anyone awake. It felt like he had completely forgotten that we were renting his house. "What are you doing here?" my father asked angrily. Bill was sitting on the couch and hesitated for a moment. He stood up, smiled, and said that he had just come to check the fridge.
No worries, I fixed it. Now your food won't spoil,
he said. He wished us good night and left. Dad stood there, stunned. He hadn't even had a chance to say anything. It was definitely not normal. We exchanged worried looks, but decided to go back to bed. I went upstairs, thinking that Bill was definitely strange. I just wanted to leave this place already. I fell asleep quickly and slept until about 4 a.m. And then I heard another noise. This time, it was right outside my door. I got up and approached it carefully. The door was thin, and I could hear someone breathing right behind it. I took a step back, and the floor creaked. I immediately heard quick footsteps running down the stairs. I opened the door and followed, and there he was again. "Bill, what are you doing here?" I demanded angrily. "You know you're not allowed to be inside while the house is rented out." Bill stood silently near the fireplace, ignoring me. "Bill?" He still didn't respond. The house was dark, except for the flickering light from the fireplace. I noticed our food lying out on the table. He had been eating our food. Suddenly he turned around, and his face no longer looked friendly. In a low, angry voice, he said,
"Everything here is mine. It's all mine."
He repeated it and started walking toward me. "Bill, what are you doing?" I backed away. He stopped next to the table. I saw a knife lying there, and Bill's hand was right beside it.
"You're sleeping in my bed,"
he growled with intense anger. He reached for the knife, and I screamed. He was coming toward me, and my legs froze in fear. I couldn't move. I was in shock. My parents started running down the stairs. Seeing them, Bill dropped the knife and bolted out of the house. Dad asked what happened, but I couldn't say a word. I just pointed at the knife, and he understood everything. He rushed out the door, but it was too late. Bill had already disappeared into the woods. We immediately called the police, but it would take them about 20 minutes to get to us. While we waited, my parents gave me tea to help calm me down. Meanwhile, Dad searched the house for anything that could tell us more about Bill. He found a driver's license. It had Bill's name on it. But the photo showed a completely different man. "What the hell?" Dad said. Soon the police arrived, and we told them everything. They started searching and investigating, but they never found the man who tried to attack me. They never found the real Bill either. To this day, I don't know who rented us that house, or what he did to the real Bill, and I'm too afraid to even imagine what he might have wanted to do to me. I'll never forget his face. Never. Hi, my name is Paul. This story happened a few years ago, 5 days before Christmas. At the time, I lived with my wife and son in a house out in the suburbs. Like most people in the country, we were getting ready to celebrate Christmas. But that year, something was different. None of the houses in the neighborhood had decorations up, except ours. Our home was lit up with strings of lights and ornaments everywhere. My son absolutely loves decorating for the holidays, so every year I help him bring a festive mood to the whole block. It kind of became our tradition. But I'm getting a bit off track here. Everything started around 6 p.m. At that time, my son was upstairs in his room playing with his toys while also watching cartoons. I still don't understand how he could do both at once. When I was his age, multitasking like that wasn't even a thing. My wife and I were downstairs in the living room, watching TV too. That night, a new episode of our favorite series had just dropped. And then, right at 6 p.m., we heard a noise coming from upstairs. I immediately rushed up to check on John to make sure everything was okay. I walked into his room, and he was just sitting there, still playing with his toys like nothing happened. I asked him, "What was that noise? Everything all right up here?" He looked up at me and held out a pack of cookies. "Billy gave them to me," John said. "Billy? Who's Billy?" I asked, confused. I glanced out the window, but there was no one outside. "Billy's my new friend. We play together all the time," John said matter-of-factly. I had no idea what he was talking about or where he got the cookies from. When I told my wife about it, we both figured John had made up an imaginary friend and probably got the cookies from someone at school. I told John not to take things from strangers. He nodded like he understood, so I went back downstairs to finish watching the episode. About half an hour later, my wife went to the kitchen to start making dinner, and I figured I'd check in on John again. When I got to his room, he was standing by the window, mumbling something under his breath. "Who are you talking to?" I asked. John turned to me and said, "I'm talking to Billy." That felt off. I walked over and told him that friends are supposed to be real people. "You shouldn't talk to imaginary friends all the time," I said. But John shook his head and said, "Billy's not imaginary." "All right then," I said. "Introduce me to him." John looked down and replied, "I can't. He'll get mad." I raised my voice a bit and told him to stop playing and come down for dinner. John looked upset, but I felt like I had to be firm. I needed to get through to him somehow. I went back downstairs and told my wife that something strange was going on with our son, and maybe it was time to take him to see a child psychologist. During dinner, Clara tried to talk to John too. She gently asked him who Billy was, but John just shook his head and said he couldn't tell us anything about him. Right then, we heard another sound coming from upstairs. I immediately went to check it out, and to be honest, for a split second a ridiculous thought popped into my head. Something about a ghost my son was playing with. You know, one of those cliches from horror movies. I wasn't really serious about it. It just kind of flashed through my mind. I walked into John's room and saw a box of cookies lying on the floor. What the hell? Where did that come from? Did it fall off the shelf? I closed the window, thinking the wind must have knocked it down. Then I went back downstairs and firmly said, "There are no ghosts in this house." I told John he could go back to his room and play for one more hour, but then it would be time for bed. An hour passed. I decided to check on what my son was up to. I crept up the stairs quietly, careful not to make any noise, and peeked through his slightly open door. John was standing by the window. I didn't go in right away. I just watched. I wanted to see what he would do. He just stood there, staring straight ahead. Every once in a while, he'd make strange motions with his hands, like he was gesturing to someone. It was unsettling. I finally stepped into the room and asked him what he was doing. John calmly said, "I'm playing with Billy." I looked out the window. No one was there. Snow had started falling outside. I put on my coat and went out into the yard. I walked around the entire house. Nothing. No footprints, no kids, no neighbors. Just snow and silence. I had no idea what was happening to my son. I went back in and told John to go to bed. I really hoped that by morning, he'd forget all about this silly fantasy and stop standing by the window. We all went to bed. There were only 4 days left until Christmas. I hoped John would be okay. But I woke up in the middle of the night. John was standing beside the bed, staring at me with wide, frightened eyes. "What's wrong, buddy?" In a shaky, quiet voice, he said, "Billy scares me. I don't want to be his friend anymore." I told him, "If you don't want to be friends with him, just imagine he's not there." But John whispered, "He's downstairs right now, standing at the bottom of the stairs. He was going to come up, so I ran to your room." That shook me. I got out of bed and walked out of the room. No one was there. Still, I decided to go downstairs to check, just in case. And oh God, that's when I realized how much of an idiot I'd been. There were footprints. It had snowed outside, and now there were wet boot prints inside the house. I followed them and saw that the front door was wide open, but no one was there. I grabbed my baseball bat and went outside. I followed the prints in the snow. They split in 2 different directions. I chose the ones leading into our backyard, and that's when it hit me. John wasn't making anything up. The footprints led me straight to the treehouse, the one directly across from John's bedroom window. Someone had been living in it. Someone had been talking to my son. I ran back to the house, called the police, and found the cookie box again. I couldn't believe my son had been talking to some lunatic all day, but what terrified me the most was the thought that I had been sound asleep while that lunatic was inside my house, planning to come upstairs. John had been smarter than me. He saved all of us. The police never found him. There were no cameras in the area, and no evidence left, just the footprints in the snow. Ever since that night, I check the front door every single evening to make sure it's locked. My name is Andy. I've always loved winter, especially when it snowed. But where I live, snow is rare. It usually only happens once every 5 years. This year was different. This year, it finally snowed. How does that connect to the horrifying story I'm about to tell? Unfortunately, that snow marked the beginning of something terrible. For me, and for someone else. It was Monday, January 4th. I was 19 years old and still living at my parents' house. I never went to college. I ended up teaching myself how to code and became a self-taught programmer. When I was 17, I built a website that collected useful data for advertising agencies and freelance ad managers. I charged $15 a month for a subscription, and it brought in pretty good money. I spent all my time at home, upstairs in my room, sitting in front of my computer. All my friends were also homebodies, and we constantly talked on Discord. Our server was always active. Someone was always chatting. Basically, we spent our whole day together online. That day was like any other, except for one thing. In the afternoon, I noticed snow falling outside the window. Big snowflakes were drifting down, quickly covering the road and lawn like a white blanket. I immediately unmuted my mic and told my friends. They all rushed to look out their windows too. I was so excited. I ran outside right away to make a snowball. The snow felt soft and perfect in my hands. I noticed the neighbor kids from the house to the right had come outside to play in the snow too. They looked about 6 years old, probably seeing snow for the first time in their lives. They were laughing and screaming with joy, completely amazed. And honestly, so was I, even at 19. Across the street from our house, there was another home. A family lived there, but no one ever really talked to them. I often saw the man who lived there leave for work. He'd get in his car and drive off. I knew he had a wife too. She came out once or twice to see him off, but she almost never left the house. That day, most of the neighbors came outside to see the snow, but no one came out of that house. I stayed outside for about 10 more minutes before heading back in. I still had some work to finish. Luckily, my desk was by the window, so I could glance outside while working. I'd look up every now and then, watching the snow pile up in fluffy drifts. I worked for another 2 hours and finally finished. By then, it was evening, and the sky had darkened, but the snow was still falling. That's when I noticed something. In that same house across the street, one window on the second floor lit up. Just one. I looked up without thinking, and saw a face. It was a kid, maybe 10 years old. He had long, tangled hair and a strange-looking face. I know it sounds mean, but I don't know how else to describe it. He was ugly. His facial features looked distorted, almost like scarred plastic surgery. He was staring at the snow outside in amazement, completely unaware I was watching him. I had no idea there was a child living in that house. He looked mesmerized by the snow, like he'd never seen it before. Or maybe he just didn't remember it. I couldn't stop watching his reaction. It was oddly fascinating. But then he noticed me. Our eyes met, and just like that, he turned off the light. Damn, I probably scared him. I jumped into Discord, joined my friends, and we played Counter-Strike. We played late into the night. Eventually, everyone logged off and went to bed. I shut down my PC and glanced one last time at the house across the street, through the window. The house across the street was dark now, no lights in any of the windows. But then, in the same window where the boy had been standing, there was someone else. I squinted. There was a silhouette. It was hard to see. It was really dark. But I swear, someone was still standing there, watching. I just realized I forgot to mention something. That day, I was home alone. My parents had gone to visit my grandparents for the weekend. If they had been home, maybe I could have asked them about the people living in that house, but they weren't. It was just me. Why was that kid still awake in the middle of the night? It felt wrong, and I decided to keep watching. After 5 minutes, I got tired of staring out the window because nothing new was happening. I decided to go downstairs and heat up some food. It took me about 10 minutes to eat and put the dishes in the sink. That's when I noticed someone standing outside. It was the boy. He was standing outside his house, touching the snow. He was wearing an old, torn t-shirt and pants. It was dark outside, and the lights in the house across the street were still off. I went outside, and he saw me. I waved at the boy, but he just stood there, staring at me. I asked him his name, but he didn't answer. He just kept standing still. Then, suddenly, he turned around and ran back into his house. I stood there, staring at the house, confused. Out of nowhere, the light came on, and I saw a woman inside. She had disheveled, dirty hair, and she was talking to someone. I couldn't see who she was talking to. Suddenly, she turned her head and looked straight at me. A chill ran down my spine. Her gaze was so menacing, and she looked so untidy and creepy. She walked up to the window, never breaking eye contact with me, and turned on the light. That freaked me out. I couldn't see what was going on in their house after that. I quickly decided to head back inside and lock the door. For some reason, I didn't feel safe anymore. I looked out the window again, trying to make out anything in the dark. I had this weird feeling that someone was still watching me from that house. I decided to turn on my computer again to distract myself. It was already 3 a.m., but that house wouldn't leave my mind. I kept wondering what was going on over there and who that strange family was. I looked out the window again and noticed that the door of the house across the street was slightly open. I went downstairs, into the living room, and that's when I heard footsteps outside. Slowly, silently, I crept to the window. Oh my God. The boy was standing right at my front door. I opened it just a crack and asked what he was doing. He didn't answer. He just stood there, eyes wide with fear. He kept glancing back at his house. A light came on there again. The woman, she was in the window, staring at me like a lunatic. Then the light went off, and she flung open her front door and sprinted toward us. She had a kitchen knife in her hand. The boy bolted inside and hid behind me. I slammed the door shut and locked it. She reached my porch and started pounding on the door with the knife. I honestly thought this was the end. It felt like a horror movie. I had no idea what to do, but I knew one thing. I had to protect that kid. Then, she stopped. She walked over to the window and stared in at us, her face completely void of life. Then she raised the knife and smashed the glass. I grabbed the boy and rushed upstairs to my room. We locked the door. I picked up an old vase. I had nothing else to defend us with. The sound of breaking glass had woken the neighbors. Someone called the police. After that, I didn't hear the woman anymore. I didn't even know if she'd made it inside. The two of us stayed like that for 5 minutes, until the cops arrived. They came inside, and I told them everything. By morning, my parents came back and were in total shock. The police searched the house across the street. No one was there. They also found out that the boy couldn't speak. Not a word. The cops took him into protective custody. His parents were never found. I visited him a few more times after that, brought him toys and candy.